Lynn, we'll give it one more minute and we'll get started. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Good afternoon and welcome to the State Water Resources Control Board's Winery General Order Fee Stakeholder Meeting. My name is David Ceccarelli. I am the Chief of the Fee and Revenue Branch, and I will be facilitating this meeting alongside help from the Lead Manager in the Fee and Revenue Branch, Glenn Osterhage. Complying with COVID-19 emergency safety guidelines, today's meeting is being held remotely via webcast and Zoom. The meeting handout was sent out last week. This handout was sent out through the Water Board's fee regulation LIRIS list, along with instructions on how to participate through the Zoom platform. The handout is also posted on the Water Board's fee webpage. And there's currently right now, there are the links on the webcast and areas of where you can request a link through Zoom. So that information is currently up on the presentation. Individuals attending via Zoom have the opportunity to ask questions or provide comments during the open discussion part of our meeting. Please use the raise your hand feature on Zoom. If you're joining us through the webcast, you can also submit a comment or ask a question by emailing the email on the screen, which is again, feebranch@waterboards.ca.gov. Today we have several fee and revenue branch working behind the scenes to ensure that the experience as we experience few participation bumps as possible. If any time throughout this event you find yourself having any technical difficulties, please email the email on the screen, feebranch@waterboards.ca.gov. I want to just introduce a couple of those staff, Sarah Fong and Itzi Abeda in the fee branch that are working kind of behind the scenes on taking questions and running the Zoom and the webcast. Throughout the presentation, we'll also have program staff from the State Water Board Water Quality Program and several different regional boards throughout the state of California, the Regional Water Quality Control Boards. Again, we thank you for joining us virtually today. We thank you for your patience as we move to 100% virtual meeting space. We're doing our best to ensure everyone can participate in an effective way. So let's go over some of the meeting guidelines. One, remember to use the handouts we're sent to you via email. If you don't have the handouts, don't worry. We could be sharing the documents on the screen. You can also request a copy after the meeting. Remember, again, if there's any technical issues, please email us. Also, please mute yourself when you're not speaking. And remember, you can submit comments and questions throughout the event by sending them to the email posted currently on the presentation. Again, one more time, that's feebranch@waterboards.ca.gov. So with that said, we're gonna go ahead and I'm gonna move this over to Glenn Osterhage, and he's gonna start by reviewing today's agenda.
Thank you, David. As we wait for the agenda to come up here, I will state, like we normally do for our meetings, those on the webcast, you could experience some delays depending on your internet speed connections. So at times we'll do a little pause, give it 10 or 15 seconds to see if anything comes up more live time on emails or requests. But do know that if you submit something into our email, we will get around to it. I've experienced over the years anywhere from 10 to 15 to 30-second delays. One year it was over a minute. So there is some lag time in there, again, depending on your internet connections. So the agenda, pretty simple one, very similar to what we did last time. We will go through the fee development timeline, a quick slide of where we're at today, some of the key points going into the future months. Item number 3, we've done this particular slide the last 2 meetings, but again, we'll present our guiding principles for setting our water quality, we call the waste discharge permit fund fees. Number 4, we'll review the comments received. I'm actually going to bump that a little bit lower in my talks today, but we will make sure we go over the comments we received from the last meeting. Projected program expenditures. Again, this is very similar to the slide we presented last time. Estimated staff workload. We have 2 different slides we're going to present today. One is very similar to what was presented last time, and then we have an additional slide with some more information that we'll get to at that topic. And then we'll go through the fee by volume options, the fee reductions that we talked about, and then we'll open it up for discussion. So generally, we try to be as open as possible. So if you do have questions throughout each of these agenda topics, as David said, just raise your hand function. If you have an email, staff will view it. If it's appropriate, we'll go ahead and insert those questions throughout the meeting. But at the very end, we'll open it up for any general discussion that people may have. And then obviously next steps. When do we plan to go to the board? When do we anticipate the fees becoming effective? And actions like that. So that's the agenda. Before we move on, I'll just see if there's anybody has any particular questions on the agenda, or staff, if we received any emails that are appropriate to go over right now.
No email questions right now.
All right, thank you, Sarah. So we'll just give it a moment here. I know some people are probably still trying to get in through the Zoom platform, or maybe trying to log in. So I'm just going to give it a moment here just to make sure that people are caught up here. So our fee development timeline, what we've done here, obviously the middle button is where we're at today. It's the second of the fee stakeholder meetings we've had since the general order was adopted back in January. Right now, based off of staff availability and schedules, we are anticipating taking an item to our board in July. It could be July 6th, or it could be July 20th. Right now, it's probably going to be July 20th, but we're evaluating the board agenda dates and when the appropriate one to go to the board. And then assuming our board does adopt some type of fee structure in July, we have a process through OAL, Office of Administrative Law, to get the final approval, and that what makes the fees become effective. So that's our very quick timeline. Obviously, we're in the April meeting. We anticipate going to the board in July, and we hope to have the fees, assuming again our board adopts something, effective in August. I will state, as many of you who are familiar with our fee setting process, we do go to our board each September for our other fee programs. We did state last time that whatever is adopted by the board this summer, we will not look to change anything in September, so the fees will be effective for the entire upcoming fiscal year cycle. So again, I'll just check, Sarah, have received anything yet?
No questions.
Okay. And I don't see the raised hand function right now when I'm presenting. So staff, if you see someone raise their hand, just let me know. We can let them jump in. So again, this next slide here is just our guiding principles. This is the exact same information we presented prior. Going through these, number 1, we use a term called revenue neutral. Those that are familiar, we have a target or estimated expenditure based off of anticipated staff workload. So that target, and we'll get into that slide in a minute, regardless of how we change fees, whatever fee structure we have, once we have something in place, anytime we try to change who pays more, who pays less, we still have to generate the same revenue target. So another term we often use is a zero-sum game. So we have a target revenue or expenditure number, and if we look to change our fee structures, it will have an impact, but we still have to get the same amount. Number 2, this is not a fee-for-service model. Although the fees do pay for staff time, staff does not track their time specifically to any type of specific program activity or any particular site. So we do say number 3 kind of rolls into my next one, is these fees are implemented statewide. Fees support a statewide program. Wineries are part of what we call our WDR waste discharge requirement program. So fees support the entire WDR program. Number 4, and we've talked about this before, there are additional costs besides just the straight program staff. Most people are familiar with indirect costs, but we have also what we call foundational program costs. The prime examples of that are basin planning, TMDL, total maximum daily load. Let's see, we've got enforcement, we've got monitoring programs of swamp and gamma. So a number of programs that kind of sit above the WDPF programs that support all activities. So fees do go to support those program costs as well. And we also have legislative or mandates or requirements through the budget process where they direct us to use WDPF or water quality program staff to do certain types of workload. And those costs are either spread out to all fee payers or, when appropriate, to within a certain subset of fee payers within the program. So there is more than just program costs that fees support. And the final one we talked about is we do our best to try to set fees so we're not going to have yearly swings. We want to minimize. Yes, there may be fee increases every year depending on legislative requirements, budget appropriations, salaries, and that type of things. But we don't want to have someone one year pay $1,000. We change the structure, then they pay $5,000. The next year they pay $2,000. So we want to try to make it as consistent as possible year over year with whatever fee changes are needed. So again, I'll take a little pause here just to see if we've received any type of comments or anyone on the Zoom platform have anything they want to bring up at this point.
No email questions right now.
Okay. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So I'm going to come back to this after I go through some of the other slides. So we will come back to reviewing of the comments received. So I'm going to go ahead and ask that we go to the next slide. So moving on, again, this slide was presented prior meeting, but it's for projected revenue, projected program expenditures. So we've indicated that these are estimates. We really won't know the true impact of staffing workloads until probably 3 or 4, maybe 5 years. Once the enrollments come in, we understand when we talk about the local program oversight, those types of activities, where will the actual staff workload end up? So we're estimating 16 staff right now, PY's personnel years. So that's the estimate. We're currently using a cost per staff of $200,000. So the math, if I move over to the right, is this $3.2 million is what we're anticipating right now will be the cost associated with this program. Do you understand that we will look, and we've made the commitment to review this on a yearly basis if needed, most likely in 3 or 4 years after the majority of the enrollments come in. Program will be able to better assess what their staff activities are. We'll have an idea, obviously, of how many enrollments came in, what tiers those enrollments are going to come into, and we'll be able to better adjust our fee structure to what I call the actuals. But just to kind of go down the numbers here, it was $3.2 million of total expenditures we're anticipating right now. About $700,000 we anticipate is revenue that we're currently generating. Most of those are under individual orders, but we do realize that some current enrollments will transition over the statewide general order. But again, this is just an estimate that we're already collecting or anticipate to collect about $700,000 on non-general order enrollees. So that leaves about $2.5 million for the estimated number of facilities that will come in. So that's the math portion of this presentation. The costing, again, it's an estimated cost. I know it's part of the comments received, but we're trying our best to keep the number low, as low as we can to begin with. But there is some concern that if we set it too low, that we may come down the road and have to raise fees. The flip side to that is we don't want to overset fees. That's a cost that obviously the enrollees have to bear up front just to lower it later on. So it's tough line. We're trying to balance it as closely as we can. And that's why we've said a number of times that we'll review this as often as possible, if yearly, if needed, every other year until we come to that nice, safe landing spot. Next slide, please. So this is the first of two slides going over staff workload. This first one is very similar to what we presented before. It's really what's the staff workload on enrollment and then some ongoing activities. I'm not going to read through all these because there's a lot of language in here, but this is what staff is anticipating, at least for the first 3 or 4 years, are activities that they anticipate having to work on. If we move to the next slide. So this is some additional detail that we did not present before, but this is staff's estimate of workload once everyone's enrolled. So it's ongoing compliance and enforcement. So again, there's a number of different bullet points in here. So this is what staff is anticipating will continue to be worked on a yearly basis beyond enrollment. So I'm going to pause here and see if anyone in the program staff, being Laurel or Melissa, I know both of you are on. Do you guys have any comments? Because you guys are the technical side. You may be able to relay some of this information better than I can as an administrator.
This is Laurel. I don't have any comments, but I can go through what the items are on the slide if that's helpful.
Okay, so we may just kind of table you for a moment, Laurel, if we get any specific email questions or anyone on the Zoom platform have any of the more technical type questions, then we can bring the program staff in to answer those.
Looks like you have a hand up from Noel, Glenn.
Okay, so I guess Noel, you got a comment to make?
Yes, Glenn, I had a question about the revenues that are coming from general orders currently. How are those accounted for?
So if it's a general order separate from the statewide that was just adopted, that's considered existing. It's probably located here on the individual order. So it's in that 700,000. So it's any revenue we're currently seeing not associated with anticipated enrollment under the new statewide general order. That was a mouthful, but did that make sense?
Yes,
Okay.
Thank you.
And we'll give it another moment. Sarah, have we received any email questions yet?
No, not yet.
Okay. So if we can go ahead and go back down to the second slide of staff activities. So again, this is the ongoing compliance. And again, we can always come back to this if anyone is reading through this and has any questions later on. Don't hesitate to say, hey, can we go back to some of the information that was listed under staff workload, in this case, targeted after enrollment. So with that, we can go to the next slide, please. So before I start going back into what we presented as fee volume, I'm going to ask staff who's running the presentation if you can go back up to the comments received. Okay, thank you. So we kind of summarized the comments we received from the last meeting into 3 topics. The first one, we'll talk about this more later. There was a request to what I call have an imbalanced application fee and annual fee. Here it's called a separate one. So you could have, again, I'm just going to make up numbers here, a $2,000 application fee, but your annual fee may be, $1,000. They don't have to be the same. Our current proposal, which we'll go into later on, the application fee and the annual fee are the same amount. So we do have one program that does have a structure that is imbalanced between the two. It's our water quality certification program. They actually do what I call both spectrums of that model. They have what they call the dredge and fill activity, where the vast majority of the fees paid for that permit that are submitted upon the application. And then they have a lot lower annual fee. They also have a dredging program where the application fee is relatively low, but we wait until they actually see what is dredged on a yearly basis and charge them the larger fees upon actual dredging activity. So there is an example in our fee structure where we do have imbalanced application and annual fees. Our standard process is to have them be the same, but it is a process that could be done if that's what the board decides they want to do. The second bullet point we got in is specific to the local agency oversight. The first one is to increase the fee reduction. So the last meeting, we had a 35%. We did talk with staff. We will talk about this later on because we have a slide for it. But staff is comfortable making a recommendation of a higher fee reduction to begin with. It kind of leads into the second one, bullet point B, is to have a reduction that is specific to each LAO or region. So that is possible. The hardest part about doing this is we're not sure how those LAOs are going to be structured right now. Obviously, you know, the example people use is the Napa County area where they have a lot of current oversight. But staff and that region has to determine, you know, what level of effort is the LAO taking on in lieu of, you know, water board staff to determine what that reduction should be. So we're starting off with a estimated or at least an initial reduction amount, but once they become a reality and we actually see what's being done, we can come back to our board and say, you know, we need to either increase or reduce what the reduction is. Item B is a very good suggestion to have different levels of reductions. So instead of using the word tiers, you know, we can have categories or activities of LAO actions. So again, I'm just making this up as an example. If there's 3 types of activities that an LAO can do and they do all 3, they'll get a higher reduction. If they're doing 2 of the 3, they're going to get a mid-range reduction. And if they're doing 1 of the 3, as an example, they get a lower type of reduction. Obviously, if they're not doing any activity or there is no LAO, then, you know, the full fee is paid for. So it is a model we can look at as the regions, you know, work and adopt or approve the local agency oversight activities. And then the final one, 2C, would be, and this is very specific for Napa County, is to have them implement and manage the entire order. So I would anticipate that even though a specific LAO may do almost all of the activity in lieu of water board staff, there will always be some type of water board oversight. It may be minimal, but there will be some oversight. But we also have other costs to the water quality, in this case, what we call a WDR program, above and beyond what may be, you know, supported by an LAO. So that's all, you know, I'm going to say is to be determined. The executive officer in the regions, as they work through and approve or adopt the local area oversight, how much work are they going to be doing? You know, it's really to be determined. But we will look at it as they become you know, adopted or approved. And then the third comment we received, we had 2 different ways of collecting fees. One was a fee by volume, and the other was a threat and complexity type fee. We did not get any comments in support of the threat and complexity. Program was already leaning towards recommending a fee by volume, and the comments that we did receive were generally in support of the fee by volume. We had 2 different versions of that, and we'll go through those. So those are the general comments we received. So I'm going to go ahead and pause again here to see if anyone on the Zoom platform has any specific additives they want to add. Did we miss something on your comments, or did we get any emails specific to what we received from the prior meeting?
No emails right now.
Okay. And again, the way my screen is, I don't see the hand.
There is a hand up.
Okay, thank you. And
It's Noelle Kramers with Wine Institute again.
Okay.
The one piece that I didn't hear you talk about was the any fee reductions for
Okay.
wineries that are certified under a sustainability program.
Yeah. So yeah, that's actually, we still have that in there. So it's a later slide. We'll go over that. There really wasn't any specific comments to change it. But yes, it's still in our proposal to have that. We just didn't specify it here.
Thanks.
We'll give it another moment just to see if anybody else wants to jump in. Okay, so I think we can go ahead and go down to the slide where we actually have the fee by volume. So there's two different slides that we're going to show today, fee by volume. These are the exact slides that we presented before. Option A essentially has one fee for tier 1, one fee for tier 2, one fee for tier 3, and then we have 4 different levels based off of volume for tier 4 enrollments. If you go to the next slide, option B adds in a second value for tier 2 and a second value for tier 3. So we break both of those tiers into a smaller volume range of fees. Tier 2, if you look at the fee amount here, it's a $200 difference. It's not much, but it's a little bit more for the higher end of the tier 2. And then tier 3, there's a jump from 2,000 to 3,000. Again, is trying to smooth out the volume to the fee. So the comments we received were generally in favor of option B. Staff is perfectly fine moving forward with this recommendation when we do go to the board, but option A is there as well. We will allow everyone who's participating today to provide comments from today's meeting as well, but we'll get to that towards the end of some of our expectations prior to going to the board with any type of proposal. So again, these numbers, we didn't change any of the amounts. It's the same numbers we provided before. We just wanted to show that the comments we received were generally in support of the fee by volume option compared to the threat and complexity, and that program and the water board is in support of going forward with a fee by volume recommendation. So again, I'll go ahead and take another pause here just to see if we have anybody who wants to have any comment as far as the proposed fee structure.
No email questions.
Okay, then we'll go ahead and go down to the next slide. So here, this is where we wrap in the sustainability programs. So as I mentioned before, the local area oversight, last meeting, we had a 35% through discussions with program and management. Right now, we're comfortable raising that up to 50%. Again, I do want to caveat that there's a lot of unknowns as to what the LAOs will be doing. And once that's determined, we'll have a better idea of what is the actual corresponding reduction in fees. So it is, possible that we get 2 or 3 years down the road and we say, again, to use Napa as the example, you know what, they are doing quite a bit of work in lieu of water board staff. It should be higher. Another region may come in and say, you know what, we don't have the resources for LAO to do the same thing as Napa. Maybe theirs is going to be a 40% reduction. So we have the flexibility to adjust these going forward once we have a better idea of how they're structured. And then as Noel brought up, the approved sustainability programs. Right now we had it at 10%, we're leaving it at 10%. Again, this is very similar to LAO. We kind of have to see what is gained going forward with these types of programs. We do want to make sure that sustainability is something that is gone after, but we don't know exactly how things are going to shake out in the long term. So again, we can revisit this. If it should be a 15% in the future, we can go back to our board and adjust it. Should it be 5%? Again, we can go back to the board at a later date to adjust that. So next slide, please. So here we're going to jump in really quickly to our next steps. And again, if anyone has any questions or if we get any emails, staff, just go ahead and jump in. So before we go to this part of the next steps, once we do finish up this meeting, since we're planning to go to the board, we indicated in July, we do have time for anyone who wants to submit. I'm going to call them informal comments. So these are not board related yet. You can go ahead and submit the comments to us. We will review it with program staff as we start to work on whatever type of presentation or documentation or recommendation we want to take to our board. We're still able to take your comments in at this period of time. I would probably request that if you're going to submit comments, have them to us by May 21st, So it's just over 3 weeks. So hopefully that's enough time for the industry or the growers or the operators to formalize any type of comment they want to do as we start preparing our board package. But once we do that, we anticipate right now it'll be July 20th to go to the board. 10 days prior to that, the board agenda will go out, and now we'll start the formal comment period. Those comments will go to the board members. They will go to program staff. We will make comment on any of those during our presentation. That's the normal board process that a lot of you are aware of. Assuming our board does adopt something in July, we have an internal process that we have to go through to get all the paperwork, do all the reviews, make sure the board clerk gives us what's called a signed resolution. It takes 3 or 4 weeks after adoption to get all the paperwork together to send over to the Office of Administrative Law. OAL has a 10-day process. Those that are familiar with fees at the water boards, we have emergency rulemaking authority. So OAL's process is they make sure that did we follow all the required steps? Did we dot the I's, cross the T's? So it is a slightly less cumbersome process than going through the regular rulemaking process that can be a lot more intensive review by OAL. So all in all, if we go to the board around July 20th, we anticipate mid-August, late August, having the package back. OAL will file the regulations to the Secretary of State, and that's when the fees become effective, and that's when enrollments can begin. So that's a quick overview of our next steps. Informally, it's not reflected on here. Get us any comments you have by May 21st so we can incorporate those into any package we take to our board. And then when we do go to the board in July, that will open up the formal comment period for discussion on any fees that may be adopted. And then we have the process of getting the package through OAL and the Secretary of State. So any questions there from anybody, or did we get anything online, Sarah?
No email questions.
Okay, we'll just give it a minute. I know that I said before, sometimes those on the webcast, there is a little bit of delay. But again, when we finalize that stuff here, we'll make sure we address any questions that may come in. Let's just go to the next slide, please. So here, again, we can go back to any particular slide. The real gist of this is based off of comments we received from the last meeting. We are planning to present a fee structure based off the volume, most likely to be what we presented as option B. We do have time to still take in informal comments, suggestions from any interested party prior to finalizing our documents to the board. We are committed because we know that all of our estimates on staff workload, number of enrollments, the revenue we're going to go in on there, there's a lot of unknowns with that. So we are committed to make sure at some point we review all the information just to make sure we have that. So I do want to go back now, unless I have any questions, to discuss the comment we received as far as having what I call the imbalance, having a different, so it's number 1 up here. Thank you for going back to the slide. So it's number 1, a separate application fee and a lower annual fee. So without going into details, in either year 3, year 4, or year 5, whatever is the appropriate time frame for us to review this, we will look to change the fee amounts. At that time, they could go higher or they could go lower. So I'm actually going to ask staff to kind of throw up a chart I threw together to kind of illustrate that there long-term, there may not be a whole lot of difference between what we had proposed or proposing and with the suggestion of going to a higher application fee and a lower annual fee. So I'm just waiting for staff to pull up the file. This was not sent out as part of the agenda. It will be posted on our website for anyone who's interested in actually seeing it and not just looking at it on the screen. So I threw together a couple of scenarios on what I call the staff proposal, which if you look at year one application, it shows $1,000. Our fee structure has 8 or 9 different fees. I happen to pick what we consider a tier 2 fee of $1,000. All numbers here are just hypothetical, especially when we look at future year fee amounts. So don't put a lot of brain thought into these numbers. I just kind of picked out some numbers just to illustrate some information here. So if we use a proposed tier 2, it's an annual fee, application fee of $1,000. We will look to keep it as $1,000. And here I picked year 5 as the adjustment year. So I have 3 different versions here for year 5. The current one, if we get lucky, and I doubt we will, and it turns out that the fee that we set is a valid number, and we keep it, then after a 5-year period, that's applicant or this enrollee will pay $5,000. The middle column, which I call future lower, if we determine in a future year, again, this is year 5, that staff workload is less than we anticipated, or the number of enrollments is higher than we had projected, we can lower the fee. In this case, I picked $700. So in this case, this enrollee will have paid $4,700 after 5 years. And the third column is, we reassess it. Staff workload is what we thought, and probably the enrollments are a little less, or they're enrolled into the lower tiers than we had used for our analysis. We may have to bump up the fees. So in this case, it'd be $1,200 and a 5-year total payment of $5,200. So that's our current staff proposal. Looking at what happens if we were pretty accurate with our projections, what would happen if we have to lower, and what would happen if we have to increase. Again, in this year, I picked year 5. It could be year 4. I don't know if we'll have enough data to roll it into year 3. So the next slide is what I'm calling industry proposal. This is looking at a application fee that is higher than the annual fee. So again, these are just hypotheticals. I did about a half hour of analysis on this, so don't hold me that these are what would actually be presented if we went with this. But using the $1,000 fee from the prior slide, let's just say we double that to make it a higher application fee, in this case $2,000. And we said, going forward, we're only going to pay $700 a year. So this is the imbalance: a higher application fee, a lower annual fee. If in year 5 we look at the fees and you say, it was really close to the $1,000 that we had estimated on the staff proposal, year 5 fees would go to $1,000. In total, this applicant or enrollee would pay $5,100. If in year 5 it turns out that the $700 per year was valid, that we adjusted it to, obviously they're going to pay that for year 5, and they're going to pay $4,800. And then again, just like we did on the other slide, in the future, if we say, what if we do our analysis and we have to adjust fees, $1,200 is the fee that we need to support the program. In this case, they'd pay $5,300. So putting those two together, which is the next slide, is they're within $100 of each other, regardless of which proposal. And again, I admit that this is just hypothetical numbers. They may not be the ones we would actually go to the board with once we had more time to analyze the data. But the first column is the one where it's the $1,000 in year 5. The middle column, it's $700 in year 5. And the third column is when we get to $1,200 in year 5. So they're almost the same. It could be that you change the numbers and industry may be $50 to $100 less than the staff proposal. But either way, because we will look to adjust fees, again, most likely in year 4 or year 5, it will, in my viewpoint, come out to roughly the same amount paid over time. So anyways, that was a quick chart we threw together. People are probably looking at it, trying to decipher what does this really mean. So whether or not anyone wants to comment it on now, always feel free to submit your comments later once you've had a chance to decipher this. Again, we can send this out or we'll post it on our website. I'm assuming, Sarah, we can send this out through our Lyris list as an update to the agenda, just so people have the actual slide that was presented.
It probably won't be posted, but it will be emailed. The PowerPoints are pretty difficult to make accessible, but they will be emailed out. So make sure you're on our distribution list.
Okay, so thank you, Sarah. So we will send it out through our Lyris. That's the fee Lyris, and I believe we also have programs send it out through their winery specific Lyris, and I think Region 2 also has a region specific Lyris. So we will send this out for anyone to kind of sit down and decipher. And again, I'm fully admitting that this was just a quick analysis, kind of the back of the napkin type of analysis. It has not been fleshed out in detail. So anyways, I want to present that because industry did come and said, hey, we would like to see a proposal where the application fee is higher and the annual fee is lower. It is something we can do. Again, based off of this quick analysis, I don't know if there's a whole lot of difference between the two. But if it's something that our executive or our management group says we need to present both to our board, we could present both to the board and let them decide. Some people may say, you know what, I'd rather just pay the lower amount to enroll and then wait for you to adjust fees. Others are going to say, you know what, let's roll the dice. Let's pay a little more now to pay less later. So again, it's probably going to be one of those where, you know, everyone has their own viewpoint of what's best. So anyways, I'll take a break here to see if anyone on the Zoom or if we have any email comments related to this particular information.
No email questions.
So I'm going to wait. I know, Noel, I believe it was your, I don't know if it was your comment that came through specific to this. So I'm going to put you on the spot here to say, did what I present here make sense, or did I miss what you were actually looking for?
Thank you, Glenn. It makes sense, but I don't think it's reflective of the entire effect across the industry. I think what some of our concern was looking at in the tier 4 category, the fees that they're paying under the current regional general orders are being proposed to go up significantly. I mean, like from $1,500 to $13,000 a year, which is a significant fee increase. And so based on the earlier information presented, if you looked at the workload, it appeared that it was heavily weighted towards the beginning. And so we felt like an application fee could cover that cost, and then the annual fees would be much, much lower. Like when you look at a tier 2, their fees aren't that high to begin with. So then the reduction that they would get annually doesn't come out as much as it would if you did an analysis on tier 4. That was our thinking.
Staff, to go ahead and put the volume slide back up. So we'll give it a moment for staff to put the presentation back up. So as we're waiting, a lot of this really comes down to is what will the staff workload be once enrollment is done? And again, we have program staff who have a better idea of what their workload is anticipated to be, knowing that we're going to have to review this at some point. We're just waiting for it. So you're talking, you know, the very bottom tier 4 is 19,000, the mid tier 4 is 13,000. So yes, because we're setting a fee based off of volume. I'm going to kind of step back from the winery's perspective, but every time we try to change a fee structure for every program that I've ever worked on, there are going to be some that are, for whatever reason, it could be right or it could be wrong, are paying a lot less now than they would on the new structure. There's also some that are going to pay a lot less. So there are some that maybe have an individual order that are paying, you know, $30,000 or $40,000, but they are able to change their enrollment. Sorry, my dog just kind of went into my feet here. They could enroll into the statewide general order, and their fee will go down quite a bit. So it's going to go both ways. There's no way of getting around that. We've talked before that some that are not currently enrolled, obviously if you're not paying any fee now and you have to enroll, that's a full increase of the amount. Some may have a waiver that are now going to be covered under some type of general enrollment. So yes, there's going to be short-term changes for a lot of those that are enrolled for whatever regulatory measure that they have. So anyways, I know, yeah, I picked the tier 2 because for me it's easier to start with 1,000 to add up numbers than to start with 7,000 and start figuring out how to add up 5,500, 7,000, 9,000. But yes, larger facilities have a large fee because we're basing it off the volume and not any type of site characteristics. So I'm going to see if Laurel or if anyone from the regional boards have any specific comment with what Noelle has brought up here.
Yeah, I think, Glenn, you covered it pretty well, but we're just talking about the first year and the enrollment is the 5 years that we have. It's probably gonna take over 5 years. And so I just wanted to chime in that Glenn's correct, that we will look at these again. And if the fees are not, if they're overcalculated, we'll address it as we look at the staff workload. I know that there's going to be a trickle in effect at first for wineries enrolling. So it's going to be a long road to actually get some numbers on what the fees should be structured at if we don't get it close here. But undershooting may not be representative long term. So I just wanted to back that up as agreement.
All right, thank you, Laurel. So yeah, it's setting a fee based off of unknown future situations is tricky. As I said before, we don't want to overshoot the initial fee because then you're paying more than you should. But we also don't want to undershoot and then have sticker shock in 5 years if we realize we missed the mark for whatever reason. So it's a tough balancing act on an initial one until we get a better idea of what staff is working on, what the LAOs are going to be doing. It just takes a while for things to settle down. So Noelle, did you have any other specific comments, Noelle?
Not at this point, okay. and nothing more than what we put in our letter.
Okay. So again, I keep saying, feel free, everyone, after you had a chance to decipher some of this conversation, because some of this is new, especially the slide that had the additional workload anticipated after enrollment, the slides that we'll be sending out as far as, again, a hypothetical situation of fees, going up or going down in year 5. How does it make sense? If industry still says, we still want to have a second option to go to the board based off of, again, I'm going to call it the imbalanced application annual fee. We can do that. If the decision is, let's just go with one and let's reevaluate in future years to whatever term you want to use, right size it. There's a lot of different terms that people use to balance out, truth it up. Once we know at least a good idea of the number of enrollments, how they're enrolled, the tiers they're enrolled, how many remain under individual orders, the revenue received, and then ongoing staff workload in future years, we'll be able to dial this in a lot tighter. And all of this is separate from the fact that we go to the board every year for potential general fee increases. Costs go up on an annual basis. There are chances that the legislature and the governor adopt something in the budget that increases the cost to the WDPF, the Waste Discharge Permit Fund. So there are times that, future years, the fees may just go up by nature. But we're talking here is if there's a change in staff workload or if there's a miscalculation on number of enrollments, how do those impact the fees?
There's a hand raised. Melissa, go ahead.
Okay, great. This is just a quick question that came up maybe a couple days ago, and this forum may not be appropriate. We could talk later, but since I don't see the text that comes with the table, like how it's going to be in the water code, is this we were thinking like if we have a winery that is not, the general order is not applicable to the winery, and therefore probably because they're larger, then would this fee be specifically, like in the language, be specifically associated with the order? And therefore if it's still a winery, but say they're larger and they're outside of this coverage, then would we default back to threat and complexity, or could this be translatable? And again, if that's a conversation for another time, that's fine. It just,
yeah, I'm going to say that level of detail is probably for another conversation.
okay.
I anticipate this fee being specific to enrollments under the statewide general order. If you're enrolled under individual order or some other type of regulatory process, you'd probably be subject to the existing threat and complexity fee schedule. Now, there's nothing stopping us from creating a separate individual fee structure that's not applicable to statewide general order fees. So, but yeah, my viewpoint, and Sarah, feel free to jump in since you deal with our legal staff quite a bit. This would be applicable, at least initially, to those enrolled under the statewide general order.
Yes.
Thank you.
Anything else we can probably discuss separately?
Yeah, and that's part of the conversation when we say in future years, if we need to adjust, we can adjust at any time. You know, if it turns out that we need to have a individual or a non-statewide general enrollee have a separate threat and complexity table, we can always look to do that. We would probably have stakeholder meetings like we're doing now. We'd obviously, vet it out through exec. Just to make sure. And then obviously our board makes the final decision. If they agree to it, we'll put something in place. Obviously, if they don't agree to it, then we have whatever is existing.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Okay, so I'll pause here for a moment just to see if there's anybody else wants to raise their hand. It sounds like we haven't been getting any email questions, Sarah, so I think we're good there.
Yeah, no email questions.
Okay, so again, the two biggest things we've gone over is anticipated staff workload after enrollment. So program provided some more information as to what they anticipate will still need to be done. I think everyone understands the enrollment process is going to be pretty staff intensive to get everyone enrolled. Whether or not it's originally I was told it's going to be 3 to 4 years. Sounds like it would be 5, 6, or 7 years, however long it takes to get everyone enrolled. And then we're looking at having a recommendation of a fee by volume. We still have the issue on LAO amounts, sustainability discount amounts, and then whether or not there is still a desire to present a fee structure. Again, I'll call it the imbalanced fee structure where the application and the annual fees are not the same. So it's not off the table. It just wasn't part of this direct presentation.
Danny has his hand raised.
Okay.
Yeah, Glenn, so much like we dealt with the irrigated lands regulatory program when that got started, I remember having a lot of conversations with Tom Howard at the time about, it's a new program. We don't expect for it to pay for itself off the bat. It's going to take a while to get caught up, and you've talked a little bit about that, but how do you anticipate if it takes 5, 7 or so years for this program to get fully up and running, is the water board prepared to understand that it's not going to be fully funded?
Yes, so the implementation of the ag program preceded mine, but I believe, and this is going way back, and you probably know this better, there was some general fund support provided for the ag program when it got initiated to help staff costs. So we don't have that general fund seed money, if you want to call it that. So right now, the water board is not actually adding in any additional staff. They're going to divert existing WDR staff to support the winery enrollments. So in a way, this revenue that's going to come in, even if it's going to be trickle in over a number of years, will actually help other WDR fee payers in the short term until we get to that balancing amount to make sure we're collecting the right. Whether or not somewhere down the road, if there's a DCP to add in staffing specific to the winery program, that calculation will change the metrics. But in the short term, Danny, because I've dealt with you for so many years, this revenue is actually going to help other WDR fee payers. And part of that is, what's it been, 5 years that this process has been in place to get a general, maybe 3 years, get a general order in place. Other WDR fee payers have paid staff to work on this effort for a number of years. So this is their way of helping them out. Same thing going forward. If 3 years from now, there's some new order that has to be worked on for the WDR program, the wineries, all WDR fee payers are going to contribute to that workload until those enrollments come in and that revenue is recognized. So I don't know, Danny, did I talk off your topic or did I cover what you wanted? Oh, you on mute, Danny? There you
Yeah,
go.
no, that made sense.
Okay. So we'll give it another moment here to see if anyone else has any questions. Again, as we're waiting, the timeline, Sarah, if you can go to the timeline sheet just so people have a awareness. Sorry, I meant the one next steps. Okay, so again, not listed on here is I'm requesting any type of comments from this meeting by May 21st. Sarah, I'm assuming when we send out those slides, we can have a little blurb in there of when we would like to have comments from this meeting back by, but May 21st for those. We'll start putting together our board packet. And then we anticipate going to the board right now, July 20th. Anyone who's in part of the process can take part of the 10-day formal comment period. And then it takes us a few weeks after adoption before those fees become effective. So David, I know you've been sitting in the background nice and quiet. I don't know on the administrative side, have we covered everything that you were expecting us to cover?
No, I think so. I think we went over all the comments, so I appreciate that. Just to add to Danny's comment, as most of you know, we review program expenditures and revenues and fees every year. So in just hypothetically, and let's say a 3-year period that, we're kind of missing our mark on enrollments and revenues and of course expenditures, we would be, taking a look at internally and looking at there are other options, funding options. But it's just important to note that any of our fee programs and our budgetary programs that we do monitor and review on an annual basis. And in a program like this, it's kind of just getting started and a lot of unknowns about, again, the enrollments, when they're going to come in, and then the actual expenditures and the workload and things like that. It's also puts it at a higher level for us to continue to monitor it. So, yeah, I just want to just touch on that and just say that, yeah, we'll have to continue to monitor it. We'll definitely, be reporting to executive management and to, our board members on the fees and the expenditures and how the program is maturing.
Okay, thank you, David. I'm going to ask staff, either Itze or Sarah, logistically, do we have anything that we need to go over, or did we cover everything that you guys were needing us to go over?
Yeah, you did. And just to comment on what you asked about, I will include the May 21st deadline in the email that goes out with the slides after the meeting.
Okay. Program-wise, Laurel or Melissa, since both of you jumped in, programmatically, any comments that either one of you or anyone else who's from the program that's online, any comments on the program side?
I just wanted to reiterate that this is a draft proposal, as Glenn mentioned, that we're going to propose after we go through the next comment period to the board. And so there'll be an opportunity to continue the conversation and bring the concerns up as we move towards a potential adoption.
All right, thank you, Laurel. And again, we'll just wait for a moment here to see if anyone on the Zoom platform wants to raise their hand for any general comments, or if we receive any email comments.
There are no email comments, and I don't see any hands raised.
Okay, so with that, I'll pass it back to David for any type of final sign off. But again, we will look for comments by May 21st for this particular meeting. We will look to go to the board in mid-July, and assuming something is adopted, the fees will become effective sometime probably in late August. So David, you can take us away here.
Thank you. I just want to again thank everyone for participating today. For all the stakeholders online, we appreciate your feedback and you participating in the meetings. Again, I just want to also, if anytime, in the next few weeks or up to the board meeting, if you want to contact Glenn or I individually, please do. We're more than happy to talk to you about the numbers, and if we need to engage program staff, we can also do that. So we welcome that. And again, we look forward to seeing your comments, as Glenn mentioned in the timeline. And let me thank program staff and fee staff that helped host this meeting. With that said, we'll go ahead and sign off, and thanks again.